Hi, everyone. This is your host, Sharlee Dixon, and I'm thrilled to share some exciting news about the upcoming Triad Mental Health Summit Week, happening online from August 20th to the 22nd. This is a free event, and each day will focus on a unique theme: positive change and equality on the 20th, simplifying the pathway to licensure on the 21st, and elevating therapeutic skills on the 22nd. Whether you join us for one day or all three, you'll gain practical knowledge and strategies to enhance your professional growth. Dr. Graham Taylor and I will be hosting live interviews with time at the end to answer your questions. Don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Visit triadhq.com/TMHS to learn more and register. I can't wait to see you there.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a Triad production. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon. My guest today is Dr. Karen Dahl. Karen is a consulting psychologist and international best-selling author of Building Psychological Fitness: How High Performers Achieve with Ease. She has 25 years of experience partnering with industry-leading organizations and coaching high-achieving professionals. With a passion for enhancing well-being and optimizing leadership skills, she works at the intersection of personal growth and professional development. Committed to mental health advocacy, Dr. Dahl also advises organizations on effectively addressing workplace mental health challenges. We're excited to have Karen with us today to discuss workplace mental health strategies and her book, Building Psychological Fitness. Welcome to the show, Karen.
Thank you for having me, Sharlee.
Absolutely. So let's just start off. What inspired you to write your book, Building Psychological Fitness, and what do you hope that readers will gain from it?
Yes, well, it was a COVID project, and writing the book really came from the energy that I was having, meeting with people, doing virtual coaching every day. I had a very high volume of coaching clients at that time. As you know, many people were in need.
Yes.
And I was hearing session after session about how people were struggling. Um, they were exhausted, feeling overwhelmed, and feeling very alone, and as though they're the only ones struggling. And so, even though I get to have these conversations with people on a daily basis, it became pretty pronounced that I'm seeing, people weren't talking to each other enough. Now, 4 years later, we've made a little more progress, having more of those mental health conversations. So really, I just wanted to find a channel, a scalable way to get this information. And by this information, I just mean like practical science-backed interventions that people can use to have agency in their own mental health and train for psychological fitness, just like we can train for physical fitness. So it was really for the purpose of psychoeducation and also to reinforce to people that they are not the only one struggling.
Right, right. And so you mentioned psychological fitness. What does that entail, and why is it important for professionals to have?
Well, I think it's important for all humans, and I use the language psychological fitness just to focus on the promotion of health and the promotion of well-being, and the idea that, we want to address clinical symptoms and pathology of mental illness, of course, and yet even people with diagnosed mental illness can work towards getting into like the green zone of the mental health continuum and thrive and flourish. So I'm trying to encourage the message of hope that no matter where we are on that mental health continuum, that we can have some agency and take action to move towards thriving and flourishing. So it's more like a +10 rather than a -10 coming from a place of deficit with mental health and well-being.
Got you. And so with that, trying to make sure that people are on the plus 10 version or thriving versus just surviving, are there certain strategies, certain plans or programs for maximizing that level of performance? Can you share some key strategies that may be outlined in your book?
Sure. So I think of flourishing as kind of the intersection of well-being and all the pathways of well-being, having a strong sense of connection and relationships in our lives, and then also having a sense of purpose where we're contributing to something beyond ourselves. So a lot of the practices in the book focus on those three areas. And how I lay it out is sort of like this is a menu of options and techniques and tools that have proven through research to be effective to build resilience. And we can do that individually, we can do that collectively as a group, and we can do that as an organization or as a community. I encourage people to think of it as putting your own recipe together and figuring out which ingredients are going to work well for you. So
Okay.
in the book, there are top down strategies. We call those top down, inside out strategies. So those might be things like cognitive reframing, upgrading our mental models, turning down the volume on our inner critic voice, and adjusting our thinking so that we're having a proportionate response to stressors, upgrading our relationship with stress, looking at how we call what we call stress matters. So part of it is a way of how do we reduce and decrease unnecessary distress, and then how
Okay.
do we promote positive affect and flourishing.
Got you. So it really sounds like you're trying to help people, maybe even change their mindset around psychological fitness. Then, okay. So how can people really cultivate a different type of mindset to induce peak performance? How can people do that?
Well, having a healthy mindset includes a lot of different things. People have heard of growth mindset has become
Hmm.
very popular, and that's just
Hmm.
having the notion that I have hope and agency that with effort put towards a task or an initiative, I can generate change and I can improve. So that's one mindset that's being taught in schools and in the educational
Hmm.
system
Hmm.
where they're trying to help kids understand that rather than getting in the mindset of I'm bad at math, reframing that and saying, I just don't understand this problem yet leads to more constructive thinking and better learning. So that can be applied to littles or that can be applied to adults.
Got you. And I completely agree with you. I'm actually a social worker in the public school system, and that I smiled really big when you said that because that is definitely something that we focus on a lot is the growth mindset and how the power of yet, how we have not made it yet. And applying that to professionals is, in my experience, kind of a new type of theory. And you mentioned during COVID is when the idea for the book came about for you. So, can you talk about any other challenges or times of barriers that professionals may face in maximizing their performance? And so, maybe a time when these strategies can be helpful.
Well, one thing that comes up a lot with the folks that I work with is a very strong internal critic voice.
Mhm.
And with high achievers who are striving and they want to be challenged, they also tend to be self critical. And fear and anxiety or uncertainty, as we know, can distort our thinking. And so, a lot of mental model upgrades is right sizing our thinking and identifying what are our triggers, and then identifying when we engage in thinking traps or cognitive distortions that are impacting our thinking and therefore impacting our mood and then potentially therefore impacting our actions. So you may have heard the phrase we see things as we are, not as they are.
Mhm.
So the power of our thinking is a really helpful interaction to again have a proportionate response. So for example, if people are catastrophizing or they have an inclination to look at what is the worst case scenario, the worst case scenario, an intervention with that, I mean, that's sort of where the negativity bias of the brain goes.
Mhm.
And that's useful to a point. But what happens is we can often get stuck in the catastrophizing, what is the worst case scenario, and awfulizing and or having black and white thinking. So the practice is then saying, okay, if that is the worst case scenario, fine. What is the probability of that actually happening?
Right.
And
Right.
upon further investigation, it's often a very small probability of happening. So then being intentional about saying, okay, well, what would be the best case scenario here? And then what would be the most likely scenario? So just making observations and challenging our assumptions can help manage mental health and just our interpretation of events.
Nice. And I really like that the strategies that you're mentioning are concrete type of things and that they can really be used not just in your professional life, but in your personal life as well. Can you recommend some type of strategies that may be integrating the two together? Because, of course, we all, I know many of us look at ourselves as professionals. I know I have some issues with imposter syndrome, and maybe I shouldn't be doing this, but I don't know that that necessarily crosses over into my personal life, but maybe for some it might. Are there some strategies or specific interventions that people can work on to try to change those mindsets about themselves?
Yes, and I'm glad you brought that up because certainly we are whole people. We are a whole
Mhm.
person. So we're the same self. We show up at work and at home and we're the same self. So our thinking goes with us as well.
Yes.
One thing that I think comes up really frequently now, not just for kids, not just for adolescents, but for adults too, and that is the whole premise of if we compare, we despair, and the feeling of the fear of missing out. And
Mhm.
social media can be helpful and constructive and generative and inspiring, and it also can be very damaging depending on how we're utilizing it. And one thing that I think is useful for all of us is to watch out for the jumping to a conclusion that when I'm comparing my internal self with somebody else's outside self or their highlight reel, that is not a fair comparison because it's very easy to fall into the trap of thinking everybody else is killing it and why is this so hard for me?
Mm.
So challenging even those assumptions or feeling left out. Nobody wants to feel left out. When people are even if you're an adult, I'm 52 and I don't like to feel left out of things. So when you're seeing a post about something you're not invited to, it's very easy to jump to all sorts of disproportionate conclusions. So climbing down the ladder of assumptions, challenging and saying, what do I know to be true? What could be another way of looking at this other than just these people don't like me?
Right. You actually bring up something I wanted to ask you. So, how do we know where we are along this continuum? How do we assess our psychological fitness? How do we know where we stand? And how do we kind of track our progress to success?
Yeah, I mean, I love the question because even just being able to properly take inventory and make
Mhm.
observation in and of itself often proves to be a little bit of an intervention. So if we
Right.
have something to map against and measure, I think that's really helpful. There are all different models on this. I have one in my book that's just a version of a mental health continuum. And on the mental health continuum, there's a range of there's the red zone, which would be people that are experiencing more acute symptoms that might need more intensive therapeutic help or intervention. And then kind of the orange and yellow zones of languishing or being strained or drained. And then ideal state would be the green zones of thriving and flourishing. And in the chart, there are a number of different categories that you can assess to identify, like, where am I in each of these categories? So, whether it's looking at general wellness, habits, how's my sleep, my nutrition, am I getting exercise? What is my sense of self? What is my mood? What is my general affect? What is my general attitude right now? And the continuum is dynamic and fluid. It's not, we're not in one state or not, but it can be useful just to evaluate okay, this week or today, I'm in the orange zone. Which areas am I struggling and where can I plug in and try to make a difference and move the needle? Because, of course, we want to move more people into the green zone and prevent people from sliding into the red zone.
Right. And much like most continuums, it sounds like we can move back and forth within that continuum of psychological fitness. And maybe one day we're green zone and the next we may be somewhere else. Are there certain strategies at play to keep us kind of in the middle or more towards the green zone on a daily basis?
I think it really depends. I think it depends on what our challenges are. And I think some people may have a propensity for feeling stressed or anxious or having overactivation of their nervous system. I think some people may have a propensity to, when they're tired or overwhelmed or stressed or facing adversity, may have more of a propensity for sadness or lethargy or feeling fatigued or depressed. So depending on where we are on all of those level areas, that will determine what intervention is going to be helpful. So do I need an intervention to help cultivate calm and get me back to center? Do I need an intervention to help me generate more energy and vitality? And the more awareness we have of understanding what are our patterns and our tendencies, and again, our triggers or when these things show up for us, the more we'll be able to effectively self-regulate.
We'll be right back after word from our sponsor.
Are you preparing for a licensure exam in psychology, social work, marriage and family therapy, counseling, or behavioral analysis? AATBS is here to help. We have been supporting behavioral and mental health students to prepare for their licensure exams for more than 45 years, working with over 1 million students to succeed on test day and move on to the next step in their career. With products ranging from comprehensive courses to quiz banks and delivered live online, self-study online, and in print, AATBS has test prep solutions that meet every student's needs and learning styles. Visit us today at aatbs.com. That's aatbs.com and use promo code BHT15 to save 15% off your next purchase.
Absolutely agree. So does your book give us those interventions or show us where we can find them?
Yes, it's like a massive resource book. So it's
Nice.
385 pages, all kinds of I'm like standing on the shoulders of giants, right? I have all kinds of researchers and practitioners and all these well-proven things highlighted. So really it is kind of a resource book with a little bit
All
of
right.
my personal flavor and thread throughout. But yes, there's a lot about inside out practices, outside in practices, research just around like the power of community, the power of promoting connection to enhance longevity. I talk a lot about accompaniment. So they're both sort of the individual strategies, and then also doing these strategies in community with others is better because doing anything together is generally better.
Absolutely agree with you. And speaking of doing things together, it sounds like a lot of this has been personal work and the work that one should do with themselves and on themselves. But I heard you mention that there's also some work for maybe bosses or employers to do as well. Can you speak more to that?
Yes, absolutely. I tend to focus on workplace mental health, and I believe in general that the workplace should and can be a source of well-being and flourishing. And unfortunately, right now, for more people than would be beneficial, it is a source of distress. So whenever we're talking about workplace mental health, I always feel like it's important to recognize the shared accountability that organizations have a responsibility to set up an infrastructure and a system that is supportive of a thriving and flourishing. And then managers and leaders have a responsibility to create conditions that will hopefully set their teams up for success. And then employees or all of us as individuals have responsibility to manage our own mental health care. And
Mhm.
so with organizations right now and just kind of the current state of affairs, we need to address all of those levels.
Right, right,
Because
right.
if somebody is in a dysfunctional work environment, it's going to be really hard to thrive and flourish if they're not in conditions that are going to cultivate well-being and success. So it's so complicated. Where I tend to focus is helping managers and leaders figure out how to navigate all of the uncertainty and to help support their teams, how to have these conversations. How do you talk about mental health? What do I say? What am I not supposed to say? How do
Mhm.
we offer support? That tends to be what people come to me with requests in the last, 4 years, really since COVID.
Got you. And so what are some of those interventions and specific strategies that organizations or even teams of small teams of people can use to benefit the whole group?
Yes, I really like and endorse cohort-based learning. So
Okay.
I think what tends to work well is people coming together in a small group, whether it's your team or managers across departments or whomever, and to go through a process of synchronous and asynchronous psychoeducation. So just learning and reinforcing some of the basics of mental health awareness and this mental health continuum and reminding us all that we have agency over that and that these things aren't going to be a cure all. It isn't about like just do this one thing and then you're going to be mentally healthy. Obviously, we want to have right-sized interventions with what is going on with people. But I think having a blend of learning together, applying, sharing, and then also just having some general frameworks of how do you have these difficult conversations? Or maybe they don't need to be difficult conversations. How do we show people that they matter at work? How do we show people that they're valued? What does that look like?
Mhm.
What do we say? I mean, those are just, it gets very practical because that's really what people want. We can talk about theories and ideas, but they think leaders really want to know, like, well, what do I actually say in a situation
Right.
that somebody is struggling?
Right. And so you mean to tell me, Karen, that giving people pizza doesn't just change their mindset about being at work?
I know pizza's always good, but I know there's conversation too
Mm.
about providing like wellness apps and wellness tools to employees. And there isn't anything wrong with that. That's great. It's just an incomplete approach.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. So I made a joke there, but that is
Yeah.
absolutely what I hear often from people about their workplaces is that, it's kind of a band-aid that's put onto something and they miss that time to connect with their employer or their manager or their even other managers across different departments, like you mentioned, being able to connect together to figure out how actually do we have these conversations? How do we make them meaningful for our people? It's awesome.
Yeah, and what matters to the people? Like this
Right.
is what, employees are all different and we can't be all things to all people, but listening and asking questions and getting curious that's the beginning of it all.
Right. Absolutely. So, can you share with us a kind of a hallmark story of someone or even an organization that you worked with that has applied your program? And what did the transformation look like? What did success look like for that particular group or organization?
Honestly, the biggest impact that I hear is when people are involved in a small group learning, whether this is a coaching group on building resilience or on women's leadership development or whatever it is, the most powerful thing is people at the end of that journey being able to say, I am so glad I'm not the only one struggling with this. I mean, that is it. I really believe that. That is it. I don't have a magic wand. I don't have the answers to everyone's problems. But what I try to do is provide a container. I try to provide a space for people to share
Mhm.
and to trust each other, and then the work just kinda happens. So it isn't about which program or which content, I really think it's it coming to life with people and having it create meaning, and that is what leads to transformation because it isn't really about information transfer. It is more about transformation.
Absolutely. And that can be a very, or should be even, a very personal journey because my transformation isn't going to look like yours.
Yes, and being witness to each other's is really
Mhm.
powerful, and that's when my favorite word is accompaniment. And I think it's so relevant, especially right now. Like we all have our own journey, we all have our own struggle, we all have adversity, and there aren't other people that can solve it for us.
Mhm.
And even as a coach, like I don't have the answers. I'm actually not here to give advice. I'm here to walk alongside people, accompany them, and help them navigate. And we can all do that with each other.
Right. I can really appreciate the definition of your coach there. I really appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that part with us. So can you leave us with a final word? I know you don't necessarily give advice, but is there some advice that you can give us to our listeners who may be struggling to reach their full potential or overcome performance related challenges, mental health challenges in the workplace? Is there something that you can leave with us today?
Yes, yes, and it's funny I say I don't offer advice. Of course, I do offer advisement, and it's really easy to do that, right? But to be able to listen to my own
It is.
advisement is a whole 'nother thing. I sometimes say, like, I should read my book. That would be helpful. So, my message would be, I hope that it is a message of hope. So, it's acknowledging that there's struggle, there's unjust things happening in the world. there's mental illness, there's addiction, there's increased rates of depression and anxiety and suicide, and our young people are struggling. Like there's so much trouble, and we want to address that and acknowledge it. Yet, and we also need to focus on hope and what we can do, because we can do more, we can do better, we can all help one person. So I would just leave a message of hope. If you're ever in doubt, reach out to people. That power of connection is, you never know what's going on with people. You just never know. And having a meaningful check-in from somebody can make all the difference in the world. And that we all have agency over our own mental health to a degree.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so, Karen, where can our listeners learn more about your book, Building Psychological Fitness? Where can they learn more about you, your work, maybe even your coaching and consulting business as well?
Yes, great. Thank you for asking. So, Building Psychological Fitness, you can find anywhere on Amazon, anywhere books are sold. I'm on LinkedIn, Dr. Karen Dahl, DOLL, and drkarendahl.com is my website. I love hearing from people. I have a LinkedIn course on mental health that I think 40,000 people now have taken it.
Oh, wow.
And if anyone can reach out and contact me, I can send a free link for it. So I always want to plug that if it's accessible. So I love hearing from people. I love doing book clubs. I have a course on Maven that's coming up, which is a synchronous course where we learn in small group cohorts together, and that's always really exciting.
Okay. So are the information about your courses, are they featured on your website?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I will definitely be sending you a message because I'm interested in the LinkedIn course. So you will be hearing from me, and I hope you'll be
Great.
hearing from my listeners as well. But thank you again, Karen, for speaking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. The resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.